Hey, welcome back to this mini lecture on Bakhtin's ideas on two types of discourse. They're authoritative and internally persuasive discourse. I'll talk about authoritative first. Here's a quote. By authoritative discourse, we understand that monologic discourse that seeks to impose itself in relation to others without openness to questioning, negotiation of meanings with well-demarcated hierarchical characteristics. From that, in terms of a school setting, teachers in schools often use authoritative discourse, sometimes unknowingly. Like oftentimes we just talk the way we do, we don't know about it. As well, because students are involved, students are subjected, often unwillingly, to authoritative discourses in school and beyond, where there is this strong monologic discourse that they just have to sort of withstand while they're within school settings or home settings, etc. Whether it's an authority figure like a teacher or a principal, or at home like a parent or a guardian. Authoritative discourse, quote, approaches us from without. It is distance, taboo, and permits no play with its framing context. We recite it. It has great power over us, but only while in power, if ever dethroned, it immediately becomes a dead thing, a relic. That's again from Bakhtin. Some things to note. Teachers in schools and even students often adhere to authoritative discourse, reinforcing its power. Like sometimes students just they just assume it is what it is, and they just adhere to it and listen to it and obey to it, and then it reinforces its power, becomes kind of cyclical. Similarly, authoritative discourse is often unquestioned. That's kind of why I'm bringing this up, so people are aware of it. This is in contrast to internally persuasive discourse. The internally persuasive discourse shows openness to the dialogical relations, seeking the expansion of meanings. Bakhtin emphasizes that the authoritative word, quote, enters our consciousness as a compact and indivisible mass, while the internally persuasive discourse, as opposed to one that is externally authoritative, is, as it is affirmed through assimilation, tightly interwoven with one's own word. So it's one that students take ownership of. Couple points. Students often engage in internally persuasive discourse inside and outside of school, like say during school, during recess, after school, before school, and during lunch period, and outside of school, especially when they're with friends and people at the same hierarchical level. Unfortunately, teachers in schools often avoid, ignore, or devalue internally persuasive discourse in favor of authoritative discourse, often sort of treasuring that alone and not treasuring internally persuasive discourse. I've alluded to some of these things, but I'll make them quite explicit. Some educational considerations on discourse. Well, try to remember this. Teachers often speak in authoritative discourse while their students speak in internally persuasive discourse. And these two things can easily clash because they're just different registers of discourse. You might want to think about the balance of teacher-student discourse in terms of how you toggle back and forth between authoritative and internally persuasive discourse, to make sure that you're ideally maybe incorporating the ways that students engage in their own discourse. Third, how do we incentivize students to learn authoritative discourse? Because it can be so hegemonic and authoritative and oppressive, they can sort of rebel against it. And we want to be able to incentivize it so that they can use this register, this authoritative discourse, if they need to, if they want to push back against oppressive authority. Ideally not yourself as a teacher. How do we incentivize teachers in schools to allow value internally persuasive discourse? You may be able to do that within your own classroom, but it might be more difficult to have other teachers who believe much more wholeheartedly in authoritative discourse or a school-wide culture. And I wonder if there's a thing where we can merge both discourses kind of more seamlessly, where they kind of toggle seamlessly back and forth between one another, between authoritative and internally persuasive, so it's kind of a nice exchange. It's dialogic between teacher and students. That was Bakhtin on two types of discourse. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. Hope to see you again soon.